Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have it already, have your fish sticks out. Tartar sauce is here. You knew it was going to happen. Yes, flash out those jerseys, boys.
Yes.
And I'm not going to lie. I feel like I'm in a draft right now, but I could not do this until I had Nick back on the show. I blame him big time for my decision in doing this, but there were two reasons why I'm doing this. Number one, I have a couple of friends of mine who are non-hockey fans who do enjoy watching the show. They said, listen, you've got a couple of nice jerseys out there that represent different eras, different timetables. They said, you don't have one from that era. But the number one reason, and I have to give Nick credit on this one, and I hate giving Nick credit, that book was a game changer, no doubt. So, Nick, all right, Brian, you get your moment here, okay? This is all Nick's fault, but this was eventually going to have to happen anyway. So here we go.
Big reveal.
Can we have a drum roll, please?
Yeah, this is exciting. Hey, there we go. The original. Very nice. It's Tommy Salo. Interesting choice.
Nice choice. Nice choice.
There we go. This is the official moment that he becomes a 96-97 Islander. 25th anniversary.
Nice. Nice.
That's a nice patch.
And he's got the hat, too. He's got the hat.
And something else? We got
Oh, it's 25th logo. Okay, that's still good. That's still good.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen that hat before.
Oh, yeah.
The 20th, yep.
You see that one?
Yeah.
Yep. So, boys and girls, welcome once again, Nick Hirshon, to the show. We are doing 90s style here, a what if fisherman style. Nick, first off, thank you for coming on. I know you had a little emergency there before.
Yeah. No, I'm good. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Paul. I'm good to see you, Gary. And it's always fun to talk about this stuff of my favorite era.
I just love that we're just matching in colors. That's perfect.
Yeah.
We have all the three different. We have the home and the way.
Yeah, we have the whole different spectrum.
Home way. Yeah. Yes. And the reason why I have that right now, gentlemen and boys and girls, welcome to the show. I'm going to switch this up tonight. We are literally going to do a what if. The problems that the Islanders continue to have after this logo was very evident, and it wasn't solved until just 2 years ago. But this year's Islander squad in the next couple of years, they have the same problems right now that the Islanders had 20 years ago.
30
years ago. Yeah, probably. But in this case, we brought Nick back on because, Nick, there was a big reason why the Islanders tried to go with the fisherman logo and go away from tradition and whatnot, and that was very prevalent in your book. We want fish sticks here. We got that logo. We'll have that link up for you guys later, but tell us why the Islanders wanted to go into that fisherman logo.
It's a confluence of factors, really. I mean, some of it has to do with where the Islanders were at that time going into the 95-96 season. And some of it is just the trends in hockey, right? So in the book, I talk about how in 1988, when the LA Kings trade for Wayne Gretzky and decide to unveil him in their brand new jerseys, and then all of a sudden his jersey sells before he's played a single game, becomes one of the best-selling jerseys. And there's an understanding that people are buying it out of market, even if they're not LA Kings fans, just because it's a cool thing to wear. It looks fashionable. And then a few years later, you have the San Jose Sharks come in with the cartoon of the shark chopping on the hockey stick. And then the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, off the success of the Disney Kids movie, having their duck-shaped hockey mask logo and all of those jerseys doing really well. And the Islanders then thinking, we want a slice of that pie. So maybe if we have some sort of a cartoony logo like the Sharks or the Ducks. And of course, there were a lot of differences between those franchises, and that's what's part of the problem and the failure of the fisherman logo, as we come to find out. I mean, the Islanders obviously did not have a Wayne Gretzky-like character in 1995 to 97. The Islanders were not a brand new franchise as the Sharks or the Ducks were, so this looked like they were turning their backs on the history of the 4 Stanley Cups. And then also just the Islanders were trying to make money. I mean, at the period when this was going on, they needed a quick payday. They wanted to reinvigorate the fan base. They didn't have the money to pay for arena upgrades or get new players. So a quick thing is like a new coat of paint. We're going to outfit them in new jerseys. Maybe they were thinking like, oh, this is the sort of thing that people will wear on MTV, or they'll start, selling these. And hey, other guy, Paul. And and you got your fan base out in force.
Always.
But yeah, so there was a lot of different factors that kind of led to them choosing it. And then poor decision making within the Islanders ownership group, and lots of other things to go into more detail about, but those were some of the reasons why they decided to make that change.
Gary, you were on Long Island, certainly more than I was during those years. Go through them very, very briefly. How well received were they when you were in the hockey stands or whatnot?
Definitely not. But as many people know me over the years, at that time, in the 90s, I was a jersey hound. I was buying all sorts of jerseys, not just Islanders, but a lot of other teams too. I had my Pavel Bure Vancouver Canuck jersey, which was my second favorite team at the time. I had an LA Kings Kelly Rudy. No, I didn't get Gretzky, but I had all sorts of other jerseys around. And when the announcement came out about the jersey, I was actually in Foxwoods. I took my mother up to Foxwoods. She was one of those bingo freaks. So I drove her up to Foxwoods to play bingo one day, took a day off from work. And there it was on page 3 of the New York Daily News, and it showed the logo. And I looked at my mother looked at it and she goes, the Islanders are going to wear that thing? And I'm like, I think they are, And when we saw the jersey, she's like, my mother wasn't a hockey fan, but she goes, that thing is ugly. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's our jersey. I said, what am I going to do? I'm a fan of this team. So in November of that year, I went to go around the places here to look for and purchase a jersey. And I couldn't find one anywhere. I was a little big, so that was another issue. I mean, whatever I could find, it was all small sizes. So I couldn't. So I ended up actually calling a place up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and was able to get this beautiful 1995 Wendell Clark jersey with the A on it here, number 17. It's not perfectly, the numbers are not perfect in the back, but it's good enough for me because I'm even then at that time I was even more of a jersey stickler, if you will. So, but it was fine, and I spent $300 for it at the time. That's a lot of money. I mean, because jerseys then, game weight, stitch jerseys were going for about 175. So this one for $300, but it was worth it. And I wore it proudly, I always said I was ambivalent to what it was, but it's our team. And I was definitely a huge minority when it came down to that. There was not many people like me wearing the jersey at that time. Not a lot of people supporting it. There was all these organizations that were, saying, putting out petitions, banning it, and all these other things going on. But, I just said, you know what? It's my team. They're wearing this jersey. I should support this jersey. And I did.
And speaking of the team, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to play a game of what if. For those of you who are Marvel fans, put on your little hats and dive deep here. What I want to do tonight is that hopefully my goal is to show the younger fans we're not going to talk about Milbury. We're not even going to talk about the Roberto Luongo. We're not going to talk about Brian Berard. We're not even going to talk about Wade Redden. We're not even going to talk about Zdeno Chara. Why? Because they probably are not on this team if the Islanders actually had an arena that was making money and the team was winning. Now, at the same time, we're not going to talk about the late 80s, early 90s, because that's an even bigger what if. But we're going to go right now. What the goal tonight is to show that this logo, instead of saying what a horrible time that was, I wanted to switch it to, man, this team, what could have been. Because in all honesty, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to ask Nick and Gary these questions I already know the answers to, you're going to be like, wow, okay, maybe we'll keep this as we'll keep an open-minded here, and this is what I want you guys to do. So what I did is that I compiled all the players from the New York Islanders from basically 92 to 94. Okay, and this was the lineup. Now, granted, we'll get into some of the other details. First line, Derek King, Pierre Turgeon, Stevie Thomas. Not a bad first line.
Nope.
Your second line, Marty McGuinness, Ray Ferraro, Pat Flatley. Pat Flatley at that time was still a very good second line right winger, but he was slowly starting to descend. But at that time, he was still good. Your third line, Benoit Hogue, current New Jersey Devils general manager Tom Fitzgerald, and Brad Dalgarno. We'll talk about Dalgarno in a minute. How he escaped the expansion draft is beyond me. But your fourth line, David Volek, Claude Loisel, Mick Vukota. Those are your 12 that survived those 3 years of New York Islander hockey. But here's the part that I really, as someone who covers the draft and the development of prospects, this is where I almost cried. This is why I never bought this jersey until after reading Nick's book. Okay? This was already in our farm system past the 94 team. Todd Bertuzzi, Travis Green, Ziggy Palffy, Andreas Johansson. For those of you who don't know Andreas Johansson, he came down a little longer, but he ended up playing 300-400 games for the Nashville Predators. He was still a serviceable left winger. Derek Armstrong at center ended up having a great career as a fourth line center for the Los Angeles Kings. And then you have on defense Vladimir Malakoff, Uwe Krupp, which I will say right now, gentlemen, if the Islanders had money, Uwe Krupp does not get traded to the Nordiques, and the Islanders do not trade for Brett Lindros. Doesn't happen. Because, Nick, we'll get into Brett Lindros in a minute. Scott LaChance, Tom Curvers, Darius Kasparaitis, Richie Pilon, Dennis Vasky, Gene Chenoweth, and Ken Norton. That was just on the Islander team then.
That's Jeff Norton.
Oh, Jeff Norton. I knew I was going to mess
Ken
that
Norton
up.
was the boxer.
Thank you. In the Islanders farm system, Brian McCabe, Brad Lukowicz, two-time Stanley Cup winner, boys and girls. Dick Tarnstrom. For those of you who don't know who Dick Tarnstrom is, Pittsburgh Penguins will know. He had a very good, successful season as the puck-moving defenseman for Pittsburgh before Chris Letang. And then by a guy by the name of Jason Strudwick, who is probably this day's modern age Scott Mayfield.
Right here.
Okay. That was in the Islanders pipeline by July of 94. Now, Nick, going back to you and your book for a moment. Granted, we probably if we didn't go for Lindros, we were probably getting someone like Wade Belak at that time. He was another right winger after that. He played 500 games. He probably could have played for Mick Vukota, replaced Mick Vukota, but why were the Islanders so intrigued about going after Brett Lindros?
Well, it's the same impetus for almost every move that they made at that time, right? The same reason why they went for the Fisherman logo. I know we're not going to talk too much about Mike Milbury, but the same reason why they hired Mike Milbury, who was an ESPN analyst and also had been, coach of the year with the Boston Bruins. But the reason why was because it was a name, it was splashy. A big part of it is it's almost like what I feel a fan would think of today. Well, maybe if we draft Brett Lindros, then in a few years when Eric Lindros becomes a free agent, he'll want to play with his little brother, and Long Island will be the only market that can offer that, even if we can't offer money, right? And that's really what seemed to be a lot of the reasoning behind it. But again, they put a ton of pressure on Brett Lindros early on. There were articles comparing him to all the Islanders' greats. I was stunned when I did all of this research for the book about how many Islanders goalies in the system were compared to the next Billy Smith, or every defenseman was the next Dennis Potvin, et cetera. And they made a lot of comparisons between Lindros and Bertuzzi with Clark Gillies and that kind of a style of a player. It, of course, messes with a young player's psyche, as if Brett Lindros didn't have enough to live up to because of his last name coming into the league. And they want to change around his style, and they kind of made it sound like he was going to be a scorer just because his brother was, and that really just wasn't his game. And of course it's sad because Brett Lindros ended up, having concussions and just like his brother, not playing a full career. But it's like this odd marketing. When I look back at the quotes at the time, from Maloney as Islanders' original GM before he was replaced by the coach he had hired, Mike Milbury, and just looking at some of the reporting saying how great he was going to be. And that's really sad because it seems like a classic example of the media building somebody up. And then when they don't meet the media created expectations around them, saying, what the hell? How come this guy isn't the second coming of Eric Lindros? And it's like, well, because he never was, but you made it out.
Gary, after going through that lineup, again, doing the what if, Islanders have that arena, even call it the suites. Let's say the Islanders have enough suites to get them through. They have the money there to at least afford the players. This is a very deep team come 95, 96. Do you feel that this team, and you know me from a development standpoint, this team probably could have gone all the way to 2000 and tell these kids, look, just be yourselves. Don't worry about being Clark. We've got this. You just learn from us.
Because again, I know you don't want to get into the Milbury end, but just extending, as you said, by a couple of years on the pipeline. In the 95, 96 season, the Islanders moved their AHL franchise from Capital District to Denver, Colorado, and became the Denver Grizzlies. And Tommy Salo and a bunch of other guys that are coming in the pipeline, the Fichos and that, were coming into their own in Denver, and under the tutelage of Butch Goring, they won the IHL championship. And they won again the next year. They won 2 straight years in Denver before they became they moved to Salt Lake City because the next year Denver became the Colorado Avalanche. And of course,
correct,
won the Stanley Cup. But they had a pipeline. They had we, as listening to fans over the last couple of years, they're constantly complaining about what the pipeline is, and Paul has done his best to try to explain to people that there are good kids coming in the system. But at that time, especially to the younger fans that are listening that weren't around 25, 30 years ago when we were really involved, that was probably some of the deepest pipelines we've had. And if things were, like I said, if things were better, if we had, another 10 extra suites, another $7 million or $6 million of revenue streams coming in, we wouldn't have had to, deal with those crazy trades and moving Pierre Turgeon and moving, these other guys
Don
around.
Maloney had to do was draft from there on out. Bill Torrey literally gift wrapped
Gave him
up.
the blueprint. The blueprint was there. It was solid. It was deep. All he had to do was fortify. And if you fortified it, who knows what this team could have done.
And it's sad. I look at the, everyone talks about the Montreal Expos in baseball being, that example of it.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. They had Randy Johnson and they had Pedro Martinez and they had, later Vlad Guerrero, Jose Villa, all these different guys who they ended up having to trade. They just couldn't afford. And this is what it feels like when you look at the Islanders. And of course, not all of these guys would have been on the team at one time. There would have been some sort of changes, but still, the idea that they could have had this amazing crew, and even some of those guys who were on the 95-96 team, if they were able to keep them long-term and then, supplement them with veteran players and more skilled players at different times. But it just, going through all those news reports, they kept swapping out talented young guys for someone else. Sometimes they got younger talent, like Kenny Janssen came in during that era, or at the end, Zdeno Chara and all that. But again, what was key with a lot of those guys is even when they would trade for them, they weren't around. That's actually why when I was growing up, I was so grateful to see Kenny Janssen experience success with the Islanders in 01, 02, when they had that wonderful run with Yashin and Pekka and Osgood, because it was okay, here are some guys like Steve Webb was on that team. Here are some of these guys who were still, suffered through all of that garbage and were around to see it. But yeah, it makes you wonder. It's one of the great hypotheticals in hockey history, huh?
No, it is absolutely. And this was the Islanders' record throughout the 90s. 786 games played, 279 wins, 409 losses, 97 ties, 1 overtime, 656 points. Boys and girls, for those of you who know me and you love playing the percentages at that point, that's a 68-point season for the entire decade. Gentlemen, we're talking a couple of $1 million each year. The Islanders would have been far better than the 68-point team. But let me ask you, I'm going to ask you both here. Nick, in your interviews, and Gary, from all the players you've talked to in the past, do you feel that if money, and I talked to Rich Pilon about this before coming onto the show, he felt that if money was not an issue, a good chunk of these players were staying for a solid 3-4 years. And that seems to be the same, I don't want to say the same story, but that's the same positive news we're hearing right now. Nick, do you have that same kind of info?
I was going to say, isn't it funny how history repeats itself? Because we hear that so often of no one wants to come to the Islanders, but once they're here, they start to love it and they see how great Long Island is. I was actually, just if I could have a transgression here for a second, I was going to say, you mentioned Rich Pilon, and this is not in my book, but he was one of my favorite interviews because he was so open. He's just a very funny guy too. And at one point, I've told this story maybe in a podcast or 2 years ago, but I was talking to all the Islanders players in that era about whether they kept their fisherman jerseys. Because some guys were I really didn't like it, or I just don't keep track of that stuff. I gave it away. But a lot of guys were I have it framed somewhere in my house. I gave it to my son or whatever it is. And with him, I asked, and he deadpanned, and this is us on the phone, and he deadpan said, yeah, I have it in my closet. My wife asked me to wear it sometimes to bed. And I was I just paused for a second.
That's rich.
And then he all of a sudden, you could hear it on the recording where I'm just paused, it's the first time I met this guy, I don't want to say. And then he starts bursting out laughing, and he got me on that for a second. Yeah, I mean, look, money is the great equalizer. Money solves all ills, right? And so this is really the beginning of Long Island kind of being viewed as unfit to have a professional sports franchise. Just didn't fit in anymore in the new NHL, where the markets that could sustain winning teams had just flush with cash, and they had gigantic city populations around them. Long Island has a large population, but it's really spread out.
Right.
And a lot of the affluent people who live on Long Island aren't all hockey fans. And so like the Hamptons is very far away from where Nassau Coliseum is, and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, you imagine what money could have done. Also, money could have just made the facilities a lot better, which would have made players more happy about staying there, and would have, of course, just created so many different things, because we know that the fan support was so strong during the Stanley Cup dynasty and afterward. And folks like Gary were still in the stands and still, cheering on the team, even when the team wasn't doing so well. And when this is kind of what I remember growing up, although I became a fan a little bit after this era of the Fisherman logo, but this was a time when it was not easy to be an Islanders fan, and you were being mocked with the "We want fish sticks" chant from the Rangers fans. That's the title of my book, and people throwing fish on the ice and all this sort of terrible stuff. So, yeah, it's a shame, because you look back and you're like, man, if someone like Scott Malkin and John Ledecky had maybe like entered the equation at that point, what could this team have become? Or someone with Lou Lamoriello's prowess, or just someone who was like a little bit better at keeping that all together. Yeah, we would be in much better shape.
Gary, I'm going to pull this one on you. That 92 through 94 team, that offense, they were right around 3.67 goals per game, which is pretty average at that time for that team. And that's not really including Palfi, Bertuzzi, or anybody else yet. Okay. There's a reason why I picked Tommy Salo for my Islanders Fisherman jersey, because I always felt, number one, Palfi for me, yes, he had the most success in the Fisherman uniform.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, Tommy Salo was the epitome of what not to do with players, especially in terms of development. Tommy Salo, gentlemen, and I'm going to post this number right now, from 95-96, just until the 99-2000 season was over. In those short years, Tommy Salo, in 264 games, posted a 2.62 goals against average. That was playing with the Fish Sticks Islanders and some mediocre Edmonton Oilers teams.
Mm-hmm.
These are the only guys who played either more games or the same amount. These are the only goalies who surpassed him in that time frame. John Van Beesbrook, then with the Florida Panthers, already went to the Stanley Cup. Patrick Waugh, Chris Osgood, Ed Belfour, Dominic Hasek, and Martin Brodeur. He's in some pretty good company there, Gary. And if you throw in the offense from that those low 90s team, and you give Tommy Salo the defense that I just mentioned before, they're all in the system.
Yeah.
All they had to do was do a simple, straight development. Give me your thoughts on that what-if moment.
Well, first of all, before we get into it, just got to ask you, how's your fish sticks?
They are Gordon's, yes.
Yes, of course. Of course.
They are Gordon's,
I was wondering about that. I'm glad you mentioned it.
They are.
As I said, I got to see Tommy Salo playing for Denver because that was the year of the strike, and I actually happened to see a couple of games when they were playing down in Atlanta, and somebody that worked for the Grizzlies saw my Islander jersey, and we were talking, and he said, this kid's going to be a superstar in this league. He's going to be. And, sitting up in those seats his first couple of years, I felt so bad for him that he was not getting the support that the guys that you mentioned did. Because to me, he was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. He was so many times he was just head and shoulders above everybody else, but just was not getting the goal support that, to say that the 93 team, if
Sure.
Everybody knows how big of a fan I was of Glenn Healy, especially during that run in '93. But if you put Tommy Salo's game in 1993, who knows what we could have did? I mean, Healy was brilliant, but Salo was just, at times, he was on another level.
And my apologies here, gentlemen, because I forgot to mention the backup goaltender, a potential backup goaltender, and Jamie McLennan. There's no Eric Fischel. Sorry. We don't trade for Eric Fischel.
Yeah, Noodles.
Sorry, Nick. I know he's your favorite.
Well, I was going to say the other thing with Eric Fischel or any of these guys, right, is that Eric Fischel was going to be the next Billy Smith. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah. He was hyped up the wazoo, and then when he didn't come out as strong as he did, then the deflection went to Salo. Salo was going to be the next one, and as Nick said, this organization was looking for that star. They had it. The 92, 93 run, we got it. We lost Pat LaFontaine for Pierre Turgeon. So we had that star. And, everybody knows the story of him. The great season, gets hurt by Dale Hunter. He just wasn't the same since. I mean, he ended up a Hall of Fame player, got the 500 goals, but his level of his game, had he not gotten hurt, would have been shooting for the stars.
I'll go with
I really think if he did not get hurt, I think the next 2 years, 130 points, he would have 150. Easy 150. That's the type of player Pierre was.
Pierre never really played with Ziggy Palffy. Even after he got hurt, you put Ziggy Palffy and Pierre Turgeon together. Nick, I'm going to go back to your other point here that you made. You get Pierre Turgeon and Ziggy Palffy scoring the way they are. How much in sales is this jersey going to sell if they went with that anyway?
Yeah. Well, one of the surprising things I found in looking at every issue of Newsday from 95 to 97 throughout the entirety of the time they wore the Fisherman logo in the original run, because now they weren't it again. But, they didn't have a good standard bearer for the brand. In its original, the first time that they rolled it out, they had guys like Kirk Muller introducing it to the fan base. Kirk Muller is one of the most hated players in Islanders history, who they traded for, didn't want to come here. And then supposedly there were allegations that he was tanking in order to get traded out of here. And then who were the other guys they associated with that brand and all the ads of the time and all the photographs? It was Mike Milbury, who ended up becoming one of the least liked executives, certainly in Islanders history and then maybe NHL history. It was eventually John Spano, who became a con artist. And so we have all of these guys who they are associating with instead of, I could only find, I think in looking at all of the Islanders ads in Newsday, which at that time they had ads almost every day during the hockey season and a few in the summers. And they had one ad that included Ziggy Palffy, I think, one time, and many more with all the other guys I'm mentioning, Spano and Milbury and just random other Islanders. And it's like, what are you thinking? I mean, people were wearing Ziggy Palffy wigs to the games. They were all of these international NHL crews and stuff, or hockey television crews were trying to get interviews with him. And he seemed like a very, girls thought he was handsome and people were, he was the dude, and he had all that flash. But again, with coaching problems under Milbury and with expectations being crazy and line mates keep shifting because you're trading guys and all of that sort of stuff is not a good environment to cultivate young talent.
Gary and Nick, one more time here on this one if subject. We've gone over some of those players. We saw the potential of those kids coming up. I still feel their development would have been 10 times better than what it was, obviously, in real life. Vying for a Stanley Cup. Even with Turgeon's injuries, let's go along with that because that happened before anything else.
Mm-hmm.
If you're winning by almost a goal a game, you're at least back in that league, you're 97, you're 100 points, you're whatnot, you're a minimum third place every year. You're going up against Philadelphia. You're going up against New Jersey, sprinkling Pittsburgh and the Rangers for a little bit before the Rangers even tanked. And that was one of the, we'll get into that in a minute too. You know, the Islander owners were afraid that the Rangers were just taking over. The Islanders, pun intended, their ship had already sunk after 95, 96. So if they had just had the money, the Islanders would have been contenders probably all the way through 2000. And again, we're not even talking about Maloney or the next, or even Darcy Regier, if they let him do the GMing after that time from 95, 96, 97. We don't know who the Islanders would have drafted back then. But the team itself was so complete, Gary, that, you know, conference finals, Stanley Cup finals, at least a couple of good deep playoff runs. What do you think?
Yeah, without question. I mean, you had the stars up front. You had the guys down. Your lines 3 and 4 were good contributors. I started following Travis Green basically in around 94 with that kid line with McGinnis and Delgarno, and I liked Travis's play, and I really thought he was a perfect fit for the system. Could do everything he needed. Was good in the faceoff circle. Was great on the penalty kill. So was Tommy Fitzgerald. So was Marty McGinnis. All those guys. They had good, solid guys to get your special teams going, and your power play. Especially the boys and girls from that are watching now don't remember what a good power play was. Go back and look at 93 and 92. Look at the power play then. They were solid. They knew what to do, and they got the job done. So you had good goaltending. You had all your bases covered. Everything was in place. It was disappointing the way 93 ended because of what happened. And, I still scream that there were 9 guys on the ice in game 3 against Montreal when they scored that goal in overtime to win. But
that's okay.
Game 2. But still, this team had everything. They were there, and it always brings, a gleam in my eye, because everybody knows that's when I first started dating my wife in 93, and things were going great. And, you really, even though you were disappointed from getting knocked out in the semifinals, you thought as an Islander fan, you thought, this is great. This is what we wanted. I enjoyed having to buy Stanley Cup, because you had to buy 2 rounds at a time. So after we were winning in the second, getting to the end of the second round, we had to buy the 3rd and the 4th round. So it's like I had Stanley Cup final tickets in my possession, and that was cool. I was like, we could do this. We could do this again.
Right.
And, unfortunately, if, like I said, if, somehow they could have magically, like the Sims, the Sims game that you play online.
Sure.
Just build 10 boxes in a corner and get $400,000 a box for the year. Hell, $4 million in the NHL in 1994. What could it buy you?
Yeah.
What could it keep you? That could keep your roster.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have had to deflect. You wouldn't have had to move things around. It might have kept John Pickett happy.
Could have been. Nick, we're going to go back to your book. Yeah, we're going to go back to your book for a minute here, because I love making fun of the Rangers whenever I can. One of the reasons, again, sales was a big thing, but, Islander owners, for whatever reason, were worried that 94 Ranger team was just going to dominate headlines forever. What happened there?
Yeah, that was another one of these factors that is kind of maybe hard to imagine today. I remember speaking to Howie Rose for the book about it, and he had not heard that line of thinking before about the Islanders owners being so concerned about the Rangers taking over the town that they were going to change the Islanders logo from the dynasty years. And he was like, this seems like such a ridiculous idea. And I'm sure he had harsher words than that when I spoke to him. But yeah, I mean, you think about placing yourself back in that period, right? So the Islanders are only a decade removed from having a Stanley Cup dynasty at that point. Those players are not all that long gone from the franchise, because a lot of them lingered after that on the island. And then Al Arbor had been coaching the team, and Bill Torrey had been there for a while afterwards. So then when the Islanders face the Rangers in the 94 playoffs, it really becomes obvious to the outside world that there is a change, there's a shift happening. You have the Rangers on the march to their first Stanley Cup in 54 years and ending the 1940 chants, and the Islanders, who had been the one thing that Long Island could take pride in over Manhattan in a lot of ways, like I described it in the book. Manhattan is always going to be the center of finance and business and culture in a lot of ways, and but we had hockey. And then when the Islanders not only lose in the playoffs to the Rangers, but lose so pathetically and get outscored in that series 22-3, that Stan Fisher said they called it the tennis series because it seemed more like tennis scores of like the Islanders lost like 6-0, 6-0, 6-1,
5-2. Right.
And so it was really obvious that there's a change here. But as we know, you have to have some perspective with this, and it's not a time for a knee-jerk reaction and say, okay, we lost one series to the Rangers and the Rangers won one cup, so let's blow this all up and just say goodbye to our history and a logo associated with Mike Bossy and Brian Trottier and all these greats. And I think they underestimated the affinity that the fans had for that original logo. They didn't really understand what, to me, is, a logo that actually has a representation of where you play on it, which is really powerful. And one of the reasons why I love the Islanders logo, that actually shows Long Island on it, even the eye pointing to Nassau Coliseum and all of that. There were a lot of other errors made in that process of thinking that, Long Islanders have a great affinity for fishermen, as if we're living, I don't know, centuries earlier when like everybody was a fisherman, and you might have that as a hobby. But probably in 1995, Long Island, there weren't a lot of people who were interacting with fishermen on a daily basis, or, as they were like going to work or something like that. But they let the Rangers kind of dictate where the Islanders' direction was going to be. And they went all in on Long Island marketing and really kind of saying, we're going to cede New York City and all of that to the Rangers, and really go in on the East End of Long Island and hope that all these Suffolk County fans and Montauk fans and everything like that are going to start going to the games. And that just was not in their culture either.
No. So the reason why I haven't mentioned Robert Reichel, Randy, is because he doesn't exist in this what if. He wouldn't be here if Hirshon's not traded, Travis Green's not traded, even Ray Ferraro plays 3 more years, which he does in the NHL. Robert Reichel's not here. You have Ziggy Poffey with Pierre Turgeon. And you do have the Islanders making a couple of good, deep Stanley Cup runs with the base that was already set up, with the foundation and the structure that was already set up by the previous Islanders general manager. But gentlemen, I'm going to switch it over now to the present day Islanders. And Nick, I want you to show off your jersey there for a moment. Yeah, there you go. And the reason why,
the stripes that don't line up. Yeah, that.
Mayfield.
Don't get me started on that. Don't get me started on who was the ding dong that came up with that.
So this is why I see a lot of parallels between 2023 and say 1993, 94 right now with this current Islander squad. The Islanders, are they a small market team at the moment, or are they a large market team? The answer is, for now, a small market team. Why is that a small market team? Well, if you go onto Forbes magazine, I'll share the link here in the comments section. When Malkin and Ledecky bought the Islanders from 2016, basically until 2021, before UBS Arena opened, the Islanders ended up losing $116 million. Okay, 2 of those seasons were the COVID seasons, where they each lost $38 million a year. So here we are again, going back 20 years before that. John Pickett can't get himself a dime because he doesn't have the money. He doesn't know how to make the money. Nassau County won't help him in expanding the arena to do everything else. However, for Islander fans right now, you have, my younger fans, you have your arena. And if there was ever a time to bring back that fisherman logo, it was this coming season, not only for the 50th, but Nick's jersey is not the same as this one. This one will always have a lot of what ifs. Nick's jersey is a little more concrete. Yes, the Islanders are certainly going to make up the money from where they are at UBS Arena. But what Lou Lamoriello has done is something similar to what Torrey and Maloney have already done. Lou has able to keep the players here. So at the very least, the Islanders are going to be competitive, whereas he does have a few players in the system, whereas they are going to take a little longer. Like that 92, 93, 94, 95 years, these kids like Dufour, Ishikov, Wahlstrom even. I don't think Wahlstrom has hit his ceiling yet. I'm going with Alex Jeffries, Cameron Burke. Some of these kids are eventually going to fill in these roles. Maggio. Okay. They're going to fill in these roles like we were hoping, Gary, that Palffy was filling in for Flatley. Bertuzzi was going in for McGinnis at some point. McCabe was going to take over for Dennis Vasky or another LaChance or whoever. We had those younger players ready to come up, but that never happened. This time around, with Nick's jersey, you're going to have players who are going to complement some of these older players. And when it's their time to go, like we just saw in Josh Bailey, it was his time to go. And now we're going to have and hope for someone like either Simon Holmstrom or Oliver Wahlstrom to take that next step to replace him. And that is something that I envy from this coming generation, everyone who loves Nick's jersey, because it's actually doing two things. Not only are you signing these players long term, at some point they're going to be Islander Hall of Famers. You're going to get to see that, younger fans. You're going to see Brock Nelson as an Islander Hall of Famer. You're going to see Anders Lee as a Hall of Famer. You're going to see that identity line probably in the Hall of Fame, but you get to see your favorite players wear the jersey that Nick is wearing right now. Okay. For the fans that have this jersey, it will always be a what if. Okay. Brian McCabe, could he have been an Islander Hall of Famer? Maybe. He put up the numbers elsewhere. He probably could have done it.
Well, you know what, Paul? Let me just interject a second, because the jersey I'm wearing now, Wendell Clark.
Yeah.
Okay, Wendell Clark played 60 games as an Islander.
Yeah.
But that 60 games on the team that he played, that man made such an impact on a lot of those young guys.
Yeah.
And you talk to some of those players, as they went through their career, they said the short time that they spent with Wendell Clark was critical to their success. Bingo. And that was the kind of thing that you want. And that's what you're seeing from Anders and from Brock. And now Matt is starting to be that person as well, as he's growing up in this organization. So those guys are going to start bringing that to the Maggios and the Dufours and Ishikovs and whoever is going to come up. And, it just, just to add on to that, it just drives me crazy that, you see the Athletic going and ranking, all the systems, and we're ranked 32nd. I don't know. I know. And that gets Paul going. And that's a show for another day. And he's outraged right now. But you know what? In a sense, I kind of like that, because it's telling people they don't trust us. They don't trust Lou. They don't trust our system. But you know what? I can see it, and they've got to see it. And we're, we've got Nick and you, Paul, and I, we all have good enough eyes for the game. I mean, we are not experts or whatever, but we are students of the game, and we understand it. We see it. Right. And if we see it, why aren't they seeing it? But you know what? Let them not see it, or let them not display it. Because I really think some of those kids are destined. I really do. And I haven't thought that much about the Bridgeport and the upcoming system in a long time. There's been guys, but to me, right now in 2023, I really think the system is destined to move up and produce the type of player that the parent organization needs to fill those roles of the guys that are going to be, that have, like I said, of the Josh Baileys, maybe the Zach Parisis, those guys that are going to have to move on. You're going to have people coming in. And that's the goal of your organization right there in a nutshell.
Yep. And I'm going to do this again. Pierre Turgeon, in my opinion, should have been an Islander Hall of Famer. I think if he's going to be in the NHL, I think the Islanders should retire his number anyway. Ziggy Palffy should be an Islander Hall of Famer. You know, some of these other guys, I'm going to go. If Ray Ferraro was here a little bit longer, maybe he becomes an Islander Hall of Famer. You know, my point is, we had some of these players who wanted to stay on Long Island that never got the chance, that may have been Islander Hall of Famers. We'll never know. And this is what I'm. Go ahead.
Sorry. And you ask anybody, and again, you know, I've interviewed a lot of the 93 guys over the years. To every one of them, they all say they couldn't believe how Long Island was. You know, as you said, nobody knew. You know, we were New York, but we weren't New York. We were that little market. And they were happy that they can, you know, go to a game and go to a supermarket or go to a mall or go to the beach or whatever and just be able to live your life. And they loved it. And again, a lot of guys stay. Why do they stay? Because of the area. And just imagine what things could have, like, as we say, what could have been, what if these guys had the opportunity to stay.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I'm so excited about them bringing back the logo is because I feel it gives an opportunity for these new Islanders, when we do have stable management and a new arena and a lot of the things that we were longing for in the mid 90s that have come to fruition, you know, a team that makes the playoffs. The fact that now this lends a positive to the Fisherman era, so to speak. And instead of associating this logo only with all of those terrible characters and times, you allow this younger generation to give us a chance to say, you know, I'm proud of this. It's fun. Instead of like, because I get it. I speak to a lot of older fans who want nothing to do with this logo. They don't want to see it. You know, it reminds them of bad times, and I get it. But I think, you know, from a historical perspective, as a historian, one of the only ways we can move past that stuff is by confronting it and changing the attitude about it. Okay, let's wear it now. And hey, this past year, the Islanders wore it at a game, you know, at some games, and they made the playoffs. I mean, granted, it wasn't a long playoff run, but they made the playoffs. And if we keep doing stuff like that over the years, and we see these guys celebrating, and they had some really great wins in it. And, you know, I think Matt Barzal had like an overtime winning goal and all that. Like, if you keep having those sorts of memories and you're associating more of Matt Barzal instead of Kirk Muller, then we're making progress.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. And that's why I want to show here tonight for the younger fans. This logo is more of a, man, did we miss out on an opportunity? Team-wise, we're not going to talk about the bad stuff here. This logo represents what really could have been, because the players we just talked about, some of them are NHL Hall of Famers. Some of them are definitely going to be Islander Hall of Famers. But for the younger fans now, you have that chance with Nick's jersey on to enjoy your players wearing that jersey, and you're going to have better memories. And that's the whole point.
Yep.
You have what we were longing for. If we don't have this in the 90s, you don't have Nick's jersey. And what I mean by that is, not only do you not have the jersey, you don't have UBS Arena. the Islanders have relocated somewhere else, you're rooting for another team. And it better not be the Rangers. So, my younger Islander fans, enjoy what you have. Don't worry about, Stanley Cup or bust, because Lou has that plan already set out. Because, yes, we're still a small market team. The owners are making up the money that they lost, which is something that us old farts could never say. They do have a plan for you guys, and I'm excited to see what else comes, not just from UBS Arena. I want to see everything else that's going to be around in Belmont. You guys get to enjoy all that. And when all of that comes together, all that stuff that Gary and I and Nick were craving for when we were younger, you guys get to have that. And then that team, when it's all set and ready to go with enough cap space, which is going to happen, folks, enjoy yourselves. This is what Long Island was supposed to be 20 years ago.
30
years ago. He's right. Pickett tried going for a new arena back in 82 at the height. That didn't happen either. It's been a 40-year problem, but it's no longer a problem. But I want my younger Islander fans to come back to this logo and say, that could have been something to see in another time, in another universe. But just remember, if it wasn't for this, you don't have UBS Arena. So I am going to say, though, Nick, I like this jersey.
Yeah.
I do like it. I literally bought this. I bought it like this, but I got it custom. I got this. Where am I going here? I bought this custom patch, and I had it sent out to get Salo's numbers and everything. And so when I finally had a chance, I'm like, oh, this is really nice. But at the same time, and I will say this for my younger Islander fans as well, if you see the old farts wearing this jersey during a
Section 316, row 1,
during a 4 or 5 game losing streak, that's where you get your info from. This is not a good sign if the old folks are wearing this jersey with a name like Salo on the back, and the Islanders have already lost 5 in a row. Be careful.
Well, this is another thing of the Islanders. Well, any fan base, of course, is going to get very superstitious, right? And so, and I do the same thing. If I'm wearing a jersey and I, oh my gosh, they lost a game in this or they won, I got to keep wearing it or stop wearing it, all that sort of stuff. And so really what happened with this jersey was emblematic of that too, is in coverage at the time, it looked like people were still open to it. Yes, there was a fierce reaction when people saw it originally, and there were a lot of people who were never going to like it. But there still seemed to be a lot of quotes of, first off, sporting goods stores saying this thing is selling really well. The Islanders did actually go up in sales of jerseys after their first year of the Islanders fisherman logo. But there was a lot of talk about, like, look, if this team plays well, there's a guy quoted Newsday saying, I don't care if they wear pink. I don't care if they wear a tutu, whatever it is, if they're like going to be in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And unfortunately, it immediately got associated with, like, when I was reading through it, it was like truth is stranger than fiction, the different things that happened in a short span of time that kind of like battered the fan base so much. It's like, hey, you still like the logo? Well, now we're going to have Mike Milbury as coach. Hey, you still like it? We're going to trade for Kirk Muller. He's not going to show up. You still like it? John Spano's going to be a con artist and he's going to screw up the franchise and make it a laughing stock. And so all this stuff just combined to make it, and now as you're talking about, Paul, like I have that part at the end of the book where I mentioned like all of the guys who played in this jersey and then went on to much better things with other teams. Martin Straka was an Islander before he went over to Pittsburgh. Robert Reichel and Brian Smolinski had good years after, of course, Ziggy Palffy. I remember seeing Ziggy Palffy playing with the Kings at Nassau Coliseum in the years after that. And so you look at all, and Tommy Salo, of course, was an all-star of Edmonton, and it just goes on. And so when you start associating with like, oh my gosh, we just like got fleeced in all these trades, we couldn't hold on to anybody. It's a laughing stock. And so my feeling is let's at least embrace it now. Now we have the benefit of time to say like, all right, the actual aesthetics of the jersey are not terrible. Yeah, it looks a little like Gorton's. I mean, that's what it is. But overall, I think it was a good intentioned idea to say Long Island heritage and the lighthouse logo, which I love. And I hope that they put that as a primary crest sometime soon, because all the fans, like you have it on your shoulders, you guys. And I've had so many fans say, you know what I really liked? That lighthouse they put on the shoulder. And I feel like if they had leaned more into that and had the lighthouse on the chest and the original Islanders logo on the shoulders, then it wouldn't have looked like such a big departure from tradition. And I just think it would be a snazzy looking jersey. But that's where I'm just, plead with the fan base of like giving that all a chance and say, and I think that most people seem relatively open to it these days.
So, all right, boys and girls, it's still summertime. We're going to keep this to an hour. We are going to have Rich Peel on next week. Nick, if you want to come on again, you're more than welcome to. We'll have fun with that. But for now, Nick, where can they find you on social media?
Oh, I'm on Twitter, Instagram at Nick Hirshon, and ICKHIRSHON. And the book is obviously We Want Fish Sticks, the bizarre and infamous rebranding of the New York Islanders. And that's on Amazon and anywhere else where you might buy books. And I love hearing from fans about their memories of this period and photos. We didn't even get to talk about Niles, my favorite character from this period, the mascot.
Niles, I don't think happens.
I was going to say, when you were going through all those other things, you were going to say like who he got or traded for or whatever. And it's like sort of like Niles is just a
I don't think Niles is there. If the winning was there, we'll see.
But
all right, Gary, where can they find you?
At IslesMed63. And again, let us know what you guys are thinking, in the comments and in here, and also to us on Twitter. And like I said, speaking as the elder statesman of the three of us here, since I'm older than both of you, not because of anything else
combined.
I don't know about that.
It's a good thing you live in Pennsylvania, Paul. No, it's just like I said, I was definitely a minority in this. There were a lot of people that even ridiculed me wearing the jersey and like, why are you doing this? And but this was great that we did this, and even years later, it's made, this conversation has really made me think about it, because obviously, Paul talked to both of us before and, was talking about the premise of the show. But as I'm going through tonight over this last hour, it's been great going back and, thinking, damn, this really could have been amazing, and it's a great perspective to give everybody else. And I, again, I'm not sucking up to Paul Kreischer by any stretch of the imagination, but I really appreciate what you did. No, I really appreciate what you did. I mean, it's a great thing to let the younger fans know, that, everybody relates this logo to bad things, but it really couldn't have been bad things if one or two little things might have been just a little bit different, how this organization would have been. And as Paul said 3 or 4 times, if it wasn't for this, we wouldn't be talking about UBS Arena today. And that's, you got to remember, it may bring bad memories to a lot of people, but if it wasn't around, we wouldn't be here right now talking about this.
Yep, it was an attempt to keep the Islanders on Long Island, and I think that's something that's noble about it and something that's worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, and to many people, it means not just the hockey team, but it's everything else in life. My relationship, everything else, is a result of this.
Mm-hmm.
So, just think about it that way.
Well, boys and girls, thank you for coming on. Gary said it best. This is an era where it's like, man, this team could have been really, really good. And that's where we're going to leave it. We're going to leave it with the positive here, the possibilities. And we're going to move on at some point, but next week we may bring it back to the 90s a little bit more with Rich Belon. Next week, he's got some stories to share, and that'll be a lot of fun. And again, Nick, you want to come on next week and join in on the fun? You're more than welcome to. And boys and girls, we'll see you next week. Let's go Islanders. Eat your fish sticks before you go to bed. Enjoy the rest of your night. Let's go Islanders, and we'll see you guys next week.
Good night, everybody.